A Chinese buffet in Missouri became ground zero for one of the most advanced criminal takedowns in recent U.S. history. And no, that's not exaggeration. What looked like a local restaurant was actually a strategic hub, a multi-million-dollar pipeline for laundering cartel money, trafficking forged documents, smuggling compromised tech, and funneling intelligence back to foreign entities, all under the code name Jade Soy. Federal agencies executed the raid at dawn. It wasn't just law enforcement, this was a full-force, multi-agency strike. The targets weren't just drug runners or ID forgers. What they found was far more disturbing. Inside the Golden Apple buffet, hidden compartments revealed millions in cartel cash, encrypted communications infrastructure.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
The data traffic, in Mandarin, in Cyrillic, and not just harmless chatter, this was coded communication, linking multiple continents. A restaurant was doubling as a hidden command post. The scope of what was uncovered shattered every expectation. This wasn't just about moving drugs or money. This was about building an information pipeline that could serve dual purposes. One part financial laundering, the other part espionage. U.S. investigators found forged IDs, offshore transactions, and sensitive biometric data stored on the servers. Fingerprints, identity profiles, evidence of surveillance-level data collection that pointed not to an isolated gang, but a state-connected operation. Authorities quickly realized this wasn't confined to Missouri. This was a transnational web. Chinese logistics companies, Latin American shipping routes, and Caribbean transfer points. The scale was global. The sophistication was military-grade. Shipments left Chinese ports, passed through obscure handoff zones, and were eventually protected by Venezuelan naval escorts before reaching the U.S. via clandestine routes. Satellite imagery confirmed the pattern. Smuggling ships were receiving armed patrols. These weren't just drug boats, these were vessels carrying electronics embedded with malicious firmware, counterfeit components capable of breaching secure U.S. defense systems. Hardware that, once installed, could open quiet backdoors into critical infrastructure. It wasn't just money laundering, it was infiltration. The deeper investigators dug, the more layers unraveled. Shell companies were propping up fake businesses. Offshore accounts were used to disguise payments. And behind it all was a digital backbone designed for speed, stealth, and scale. This is where the term hybrid operation becomes more than just jargon. This was a criminal cartel and a foreign espionage cell operating as one organism. The logistics of trafficking and the tactics of intelligence gathering merged. These weren't just smugglers. They were system architects. It wasn't long before the threat crossed into the realm of national security. Federal analysts confirmed that some of the seized hardware, microchips, routers, embedded systems were disguised to bypass export controls. Their firmware had been modified to allow external access, rerouting, or corrupting data within defense systems. These were Trojan horses. This revelation transformed the operation from a crime investigation into a national defense priority. Tactical units weren't just serving warrants, they were deploying to sea. Military interdictions targeted the vessels moving these counterfeit components. Warnings were issued. When ignored, ships were disabled or sunk. No hesitation. And that aggressive shift wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. It showed a significant change in U.S. posture, from investigation to disruption, from law enforcement to deterrence. Operation Jade Soy wasn't about slow-building cases. It was about neutralizing threats in real time. And the message was clear: when organized crime blends with foreign espionage, it gets treated like an act of aggression. As the arrests rolled in, 62 in total, investigators uncovered the full architecture. Coordinated networks across multiple states. Biometric surveillance tools tied to foreign servers. Encryption protocols linked to intelligence agencies. The operational scale couldn't be dismissed as rogue or freelance. This was a state-supported system. And when the operation hit its peak, the response from those foreign sponsors was just as telling. They pulled back. Routes went dark. Assets were abandoned. Communication ceased. Not out of remorse, but because they realized they had been caught. Not just discovered, but outmaneuvered. The U.S. didn't just shut down the restaurant. It shut down the network, seized the servers, froze the money, sunk the ships, and signaled that hybrid threats, those blending criminal economics with state objectives, will no longer be tolerated. This wasn't just a criminal takedown. It was a shift in doctrine. For years, international smuggling networks operated in the gray area.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
And that wasn't overreach, it was necessary. Because when espionage tools are moving through your ports disguised as kitchen appliances, you're not just dealing with crime. You're dealing with penetration, quiet sabotage, the kind that doesn't explode, it corrupts, the kind that doesn't look like an attack until the systems fail. Jade Soy shattered the illusion that criminal networks operate independently of political interest. What once looked like a cartel issue revealed itself as an infrastructure breach. It proved that organized crime is no longer just about money, it's about access. Access to systems, to data, to control. The biometric files found on those servers, they weren't just ID theft material. They were reconnaissance, blueprints for fake identities, possibly used to infiltrate systems, mimic employees, or manipulate databases. Not for profit but for power. And that's the part that sticks. Because when a buffet is used as a Trojan horse to compromise a nation's defense infrastructure, the old playbook doesn't work anymore. You don't gather intel and wait for trial. You act. You take the threat offline. You cut off the supply chain. You sink the transport. And you force the backers into retreat. That's what Operation Jade Soy did. It wasn't just a win. It was a warning. The shift wasn't only physical, it was strategic. A new doctrine emerged. Preemptive disruption. Digital and physical interdictions, seizures that extended beyond borders, and a clear message that hybrid threats, no matter how well disguised, will be hunted and dismantled. It also exposed the fragility of modern systems, how vulnerable the supply chain is, how easy it is to blend illegitimate operations into legitimate-looking infrastructure, and how deeply embedded these threats already are. Because here's the unsettling part: if this one operation went this far, how many others are active right now? Using small storefronts, local logistics hubs, fake shell companies, all operating in parallel, leveraging crime to serve foreign policy goals. This is the future of threat management. No uniforms, no declarations, just proxies, pipelines, front companies. It's crime at the surface, espionage underneath. And now that the US has made its stance clear, the next phase begins. Increased scrutiny on international shipping, closer inspection of high-risk imports, more aggressive coordination between agencies, because now, the warning signs are known. The blueprint is exposed, the line between organized crime and geopolitical sabotage has officially blurred, and the response has to match. If you're still watching, you're probably thinking what everyone else is thinking. How many other operations like this are flying under the radar? Could there be other fake storefronts operating as surveillance hubs? Could your city have a node in something bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you think the next hybrid threat could be hiding. And if this breakdown opened your eyes, hit like, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because in this new era of global conflict, the war isn't just fought with weapons, it's fought with data, with ports, and with silence. And sometimes, the front line is a restaurant. Here's where the story deepens, not with explosions, but with implications. Because when you pull off an operation like Jade Soy, it's not just about what you found. It's about what you almost missed. And the questions that come next aren't just criminal, they're existential. About trust. About exposure. About what modern threat even looks like anymore. Let's be blunt. This wasn't just a restaurant running side deals under the table. This was a multi-tiered, fully integrated network with the capability to launder tens of millions while simultaneously trafficking biometric data and counterfeit tech into the very infrastructure of the US defense system. And the most sobering part, it worked, for a while. 4 terabytes of encrypted data doesn't accumulate overnight. You don't just accidentally set up fiber cables disguised as refrigeration lines. You don't build shell companies, route money through offshore accounts, and coordinate shipping through multiple hemispheres unless you're operating with confidence and protection. That kind of setup requires help. It requires planning. It requires backing. And according to federal investigators, that backing came in the form of state support. That's where the line between criminal operation and geopolitical strategy completely disappeared. When satellite images showed Venezuelan naval escorts accompanying smuggling ships carrying unmarked cargo from China, the picture became clear. This wasn't just about hiding money or avoiding taxes. This was about bypassing national controls, sneaking in compromised tech, embedding spyware at the firmware level. It's not just smuggling, it's systemic subversion. And when that tech is military grade, that's not just organized crime, that's a national security breach. You don't accidentally smuggle counterfeit microchips designed to bypass export controls and re-enter secure US systems. That's not a crime of opportunity, it's a deliberate attempt to penetrate infrastructure. These chips weren't just defective knockoffs, they were embedded with clandestine firmware, capable of spying, rerouting information, or triggering system vulnerabilities from the inside. So when military interdictions began at sea, when smuggling ships were intercepted, disabled, or outright sunk, this wasn't escalation. It was recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that these weren't drug boats anymore. These were digital weapons platforms dressed up as cargo ships. And the response? It had to match the threat. Operation Jade Soy wasn't just a coordinated bust. It was a blueprint for a new kind of response, swift, multi-agency, and preemptive. The idea wasn't just to take down criminals, but to shut down the network. To make it too risky, too expensive, and too exposed to continue. And it worked. The minute the infrastructure was compromised, when the servers were seized, the routes uncovered, and the shell companies unraveled, the foreign sponsors behind the network started pulling back. They didn't double down. They went quiet. Routes dried up. Funds stopped moving. Offshore companies closed overnight. That's not retreat out of fear. That's a calculated step back from a mission that's been exposed. Because once the US showed it would not treat this like just another laundering ring, once ships started sinking and data centers went dark, the game changed. But this wasn't a victory lap. It was a red flag. Because if a small, unassuming restaurant in Missouri can serve as a digital espionage hub, then every quiet front business becomes a potential threat vector. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. If it happened once with this level of sophistication, it can happen again. And likely already is. Think about what was uncovered: money laundering, forged identities, global shipping networks, encrypted communication in multiple languages, offshore cash routes, and a literal underground data command center. All operating at the same time, hidden inside a commercial business with no outward signs of anything suspicious. That's how far hybrid threats have evolved. They no longer rely on traditional fronts. They blend in with everyday commerce. They operate under the radar by design, because being obvious is a liability. And they're built to survive not as centralized empires, but as decentralized, modular systems that can shift when compromised. That's the real challenge moving forward. Operation Jade Soy didn't take down a traditional crime family. It disrupted a framework. And that framework can be rebuilt. In a different city. Under a different name. With a new set of digital assets and physical cover. The only way to stay ahead is to accept that the next threat won't look the same. Because these networks aren't just criminal anymore, they're strategic. They move data, they collect identities, they plant digital time bombs. They use global commerce as camouflage and rely on speed, volume, and legitimacy to shield them from scrutiny. The intelligence community has a name for it: gray zone conflict. Not quite war, not quite peace, not fully criminal, not fully state, but highly effective and nearly invisible. Jade Soy was operating in that exact zone. And for a time, it succeeded. It blended cartel logistics with espionage goals. It built a shell of criminal enterprise to support a core of foreign intelligence. And it did so under the nose of local, state, and federal agencies until one early morning. It didn't. Because the moment federal teams hit that restaurant, the illusion cracked. The money, the IDs, the servers, the cables, it all came into focus. And what they saw was not a rogue operation. It was a proof of concept for hybrid intrusion. The biometric data alone was a smoking gun. When you're collecting physical identity information and routing it through encrypted foreign networks, the intent is clear. It's not about identity theft, it's about impersonation, infiltration, mapping vulnerabilities, constructing synthetic identities that can slip through even the most secure systems. That's why this operation triggered such an aggressive response. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what almost did. If that tech had been installed in critical defense systems, if that biometric data had been used to access secure sites, if those offshore transfers had gone unnoticed, we'd be talking about this story from a very different angle. But the response proved something too: that coordinated, offensive action works. The US didn't just arrest people. It shut down the supply chain. It neutralized the network's digital infrastructure. It made it clear that hybrid threats, no matter how well disguised, would be met with force, not process. This wasn't handled with subpoenas. It was handled with strategy. And for the first time, organized crime was treated as a national security issue at scale. not because of the cash involved, but because of what the network was built to do. That shift is the biggest takeaway from Operation Jade Soy. We're in a new era now. The old playbook doesn't apply. The next cartel might not just sell drugs, it might traffic firmware. The next front company might not just move money, it might map infrastructure. And the next fake restaurant might not just be a cover, it might be a command post. And even with the network dismantled and the digital infrastructure offline, the ripple effects of Operation Jade Soy are still moving. Because once you expose this kind of operation, you don't just end a scheme, you rewrite the rulebook. Everyone involved, on all sides, is now operating under a new understanding. If you build a hybrid threat on US soil, expect it to be met with force, not warnings. And yet, there's no clean finish to a story like this. Because what this operation exposed wasn't an isolated incident, it was a system that can be replicated. It showed that it doesn't take a military base or a spy agency to compromise national security. It just takes a little infrastructure, a lot of planning, and the right cover. And the right cover was shockingly mundane. A buffet. That's why this case hit different. It challenged what a threat is supposed to look like. The cartel didn't use underground tunnels or jungle labs. They used legal shipping lanes and logistics partners. They didn't hide behind masks, they hid behind menus. That's what makes it so effective. No red flags. No drama. Just business. Until the business was encrypted espionage and embedded surveillance chips, the US had no choice but to treat this as more than a crime scene. The operation targeted every part of the chain: digital, financial, physical, and geopolitical. Assets were seized, shell companies dismantled, ships interdicted and destroyed. This was a full-spectrum response. Because the threat was full-spectrum, and now, everyone's paying attention. The intelligence community isn't just watching borders, they're watching logistics flows, shell corporations, and tech imports. Law enforcement isn't just monitoring gangs, they're monitoring networks with foreign language comms and encrypted storage solutions. And national defense isn't just focusing on enemy states, they're focusing on criminal proxies backed by those states. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button, it tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.